The more we can make a habit of identifying ourselves with the ego, the more clearly and sanely shall we view the problems of life. But insofar as we feel ourselves to be still personalities, looking up to our higher selves, it is obviously our duty and our interest to open ourselves to them, to reach up towards them, and persistently to set up within ourselves such vibrations as will be of use to them. Since selfishness is the intensification of the personality, our first step should be to get rid of that. Then we must keep our minds filled with high thoughts, for if they are continually occupied with lower matters, even though those lower matters may be quite estimable in their way, the ego cannot readily use them as channels of expression. Intuition. We bring over our capacities from one line to another, but sometimes something definite can be brought through from the mind to the physical brain, and we call that an intuition. As far as we are concerned down here, what we should do in some crisis or the solution to some particular difficulty will suddenly flash upon the mind. A very good example of this is found in our attitude towards any new teaching which may come before us. I can remember very well in my own case when I first came across this great body of Oriental teaching in all these subjects. The moment it was presented to me, I knew it must be true. Something flashed into me from above which convinced me of its truth, so that at once I accepted it, because I could not doubt it. Since then, I have learned how to prove it for myself many different ways, but even now, when I have done all that, I do not believe it any more strongly than I believed it in that first moment. I was just as certain then as I am now, only then I could not have told you why I was certain, whereas now I can, because I have tried the experiments. I have myself gone through the experience. I have watched the phenomena, and now I can say I know, whereas before I could only say I believe. And yet the belief was just as certain, because it was the result of the fact that I myself had been studying these things in other lives. This same philosophy was taught to us by Pythagoras in Greece 2300 years ago and more. I learnt then how to see the truth of some of it for myself, and therefore in my soul or ego was the certain knowledge of this teaching. But this knowledge was not in the physical brain at all, and so far as I can see, it might never have come through into my new mind, unless the facts had been put before me from outside. It needed that stimulus, apparently, to awaken the old recollection, which enabled the soul to impress upon the brain the fact that this is true. For that moment, the soul and the lower mind became one to the extent that the conviction from the soul came through into the lower mind. That is one kind of intuition, and you will see at once that that also is only knowledge based on experience. We call it intuition because, so far as we are concerned, it comes into this lower mind from above. Now, besides intuition, there is such a thing as impulse. Impulse is the result of feelings, of likes and dislikes, which come from the emotional body. But so far as the physical brain is concerned, an impulse is an impression from above, just as intuition is, and the difficulty is to know the intuition from the impulse. We all know that likes and dislikes often come to us without any particular reason. We do not know definitely why we have a liking for certain people. We know that the first time we meet certain people, the soul seems to leap out to them, and we feel at once that they are old friends. Why? Almost certainly because we have known those souls when both of us wore different vestures and were in other bodies and in other races. We have known those people before in other lives, and when we meet them again, though neither of us remembers it, still the old affection leaps out from soul to soul, and we make friends with them very quickly. At other times we may meet someone who does not attract us. We may even feel repelled by that person. There, again, in old days you have been together, and one may have harmed the other. In such cases it is wiser not to come into close relations with that person, but, while keeping at a distance, lest this feeling should grow stronger, to think kindly of him. Continue to think kindly, and then when next time you meet, you may find that the kindly feeling has overpowered the old dislike, and that you are able to make friends. All these things are perfectly scientific, and if we counteract one force by another, we presently get a condition of stability, just as we should in mechanics on the physical plane. The spiritual world is higher and finer and is vibrating far more rapidly than the physical world, but it obeys the same general laws, with only such modifications as are necessary for the change of substances. Generally speaking, when we come into touch in this way with someone whom we have met before, the old feeling is likely to be revived. It is there in the two souls, but the coming through into the physical plane often seems to be practically impossible until some physical plane suggestion revives the old remembrance and brings it through. I cannot say exactly that it reestablishes it, because the two physical bodies have not met before and have had no previous contact with each other, but it is the breaking through of the veil of rebirth, and so the souls are able to regain their communication on this lower level through their physical bodies. The larger consciousness within. I have spoken of the remembrance of the soul as being the work of the intelligence, which is part of that soul, through the lower mind. But there is another possibility of intuition. Remember that the higher mind, which is part of the soul itself, may still err, though it is much less likely to do so than the mind down here, because it has had far greater experience, although it is still not perfect. It is not yet fully developed, and certainly it may err, though it is not liable to do so. But there is that higher part of the soul, which in the East is called the buddhi, or intuitional wisdom. It is possible for that sometimes to press through and to seize upon the subconscious rather than the conscious self. There is within us a far greater consciousness, which is sometimes called subliminal consciousness, from sub, under, or below, and limen, threshold. That which is below the threshold, which does not come into ordinary life. The superliminal is that which is above the threshold, and which we sometimes think we know all about. Through this subliminal consciousness we may occasionally receive a flash of real knowledge, which is sure to be right, because it comes from the Atma, of which the buddhi is only the sheath, or the vehicle. But even when that comes to us we may misinterpret it, although it comes from the divine within us and is therefore true. Each man certainly has the germ of an intuitional body. Let us go a stage further, although in so doing I am afraid that it will be somewhat incomprehensible. When one reaches the spiritual consciousness which functions on the spiritual or atmic plane, one finds a consciousness which is indeed an atom, and yet at the same time apparently the whole. This is the condition which Saint Bonaventure tried to describe when he made the statement that we must think of it as a circle with its center everywhere and its circumference nowhere. Not very helpful to the mind, and yet somehow marvelously illuminative. One may have a kind of intuitive grasp of his idea. This is the consciousness of divine union, which, in the East, has been called nirvana. You can come down from that and imagine that you are yourself, that you yourself include many other selves, that that number is increasing, and that on the highest subplane of the intuitional plane, it would be practically coextensive with other worlds. Yet in all that, though you share the consciousness of others, you can yet so hold yourself as to see their consciousness as a separate thing, the normal condition of the plane being that all the consciousnesses are merged into one. Thus we have something which is greatly less than the nirvanic condition, and is yet much more than the causal body. This germ is often quite undeveloped in the ordinary man of the world, who has never thought of these matters, but in those of us who have given much time to meditation, it has already grown at least to some slight extent, and it is capable of rapid unfoldment when we really turn our attention to it. 5. The method of human progress. A boy went to school. He was very little. All that he knew he had drawn in with his mother's milk. His teacher, who was God, placed him in the lowest class, and gave him these lessons to learn. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt do no hurt to any living thing. Thou shalt not steal. So the man did not kill, but he was cruel and he stole. At the end of the day, when his beard was gray, when the night was come, the teacher, who was God, said, Thou hast learned not to kill, but the other lessons thou hast not learned. Come back tomorrow. On the morrow he came back a little boy, and his teacher, who was God, put him in a class a little higher, and gave him these lessons to learn. Thou shalt do no hurt to any living thing. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not cheat. So the man did no hurt to any living thing, but he stole and cheated. At the end of the day, when his beard was gray, when the night was come, his teacher, who was God, said, Thou hast learned to be merciful, but the other lessons thou hast not learned. Come back tomorrow. Again on the morrow he came back, a little boy, and his teacher, who was God, put him in a class yet a little higher, and gave him these lessons to learn. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not cheat, thou shalt not covet. So the man did not steal, but he cheated and coveted. And at the end of the day, when his beard was gray, when the night was come, his teacher, who was God, said, Thou hast learned not to steal, but the other lessons thou hast not learned. Come back, my child, tomorrow. This is what I have read in the faces of men and women, in the book of the world, and in the scroll of the heavens, which is writ in the stars. Barry Benson, The Century Magazine, May 1894. Humanity is part of a gigantic sweep of the divine life into matter. We have long ago passed the lower level of descent and have risen up to the other side of the curve, to the human level. We shall pass on higher and higher to the levels of the angels, the great spirits, levels beyond our reach as yet, and so back to him from whom we came. There is a great deal of work in that climbing, a vast number of little intermediate expeditions, so to speak. There is one mighty curve of the whole evolution, but human progress along that line consists of a number of little curves, a number of little dippings down into matter and rising out of it again, each little curve representing a life or incarnation. Again and again the soul puts himself down, each time to develop a new quality in himself, each time to strengthen himself until he can rise to the fullness of the measure of the stature of the Christ. Man's life is not merely a matter of 70 or 80 years. It is a matter of many millions of years, and what we are in the habit of calling a life is only one day out of that long life. It is not even one whole day. There are 24 hours in our day down here, but we do not spend the whole of it in active work. Part of the time we have to rest and refresh ourselves. It is exactly the same with these little descents into matter, except that the periods of rest and refreshment are much longer in proportion to the period of manifestation. Human evolution is a slow process, and it takes many days and many of the nights which come in between them, when, though the man has no physical body, he is developing and assimilating all that he has learnt during those lives. It must always be remembered that the soul is as yet, even in the best and cleverest of us, an undeveloped soul. He is indeed a spark of the divine fire, and so has within himself the most wonderful divine possibilities. But as yet they are but germs, and they need development. He is not capable yet of functioning fully at his own level, where he lives as a fellow with other souls, having all sorts of wider faculties and greater knowledge than he has down here. He is not fully developed at that level, but he is gradually becoming so. More rapid vibrations. The higher worlds or planes, to the finer movements of which the undeveloped soul cannot yet respond, are material, as is this physical plane, but they are built of a finer kind of matter, whose vibrations are far more rapid than the vibrations of matter down here. We have, of course, always to keep in mind the scientific conception that all material objects are really in a state of rapid vibration all the time. The objects as a whole appear to our rather coarse and clumsy sight to be at rest, but science tells us that there is rapid vibration going on among the particles, and however dense the substance may appear, no two particles actually touch one another. There is a fairly wide gamut of vibration, and within certain rates of vibration all matter exists. The matter of the higher planes is, as I have said, vibrating far more rapidly than that of the physical plane, but even the vibrations down here, when expressed in numbers and time, are tremendously rapid. In any scientific book on the subject there will be found tables showing how certain rates of vibration appeal to the ear and make sound, How certain other rates of vibration appeal to the eye and make sight. Others make what are called Hertzian rays, electrical vibrations, X-rays, and so on. We get a vast number of differentiated rates of vibration. That goes on and on into infinity, getting shorter and more rapid all the while. We do not know what the limit is. There is a vast difference in the power of response to these vibrations in different individuals. One way of testing this is by listening to the sound of the squeak of the bat, which is just on the border of human audibility. One man may hear the air full of those needle-like cries. Another standing close by him will not be able to hear them at all. They are just a little too high for him to catch. We undoubtedly vary in our power of response, but it is quite feasible for some of us to get beyond the average physical response. The same thing is true with regard to those higher levels. The ego or soul lives in a world of vibration, but the undeveloped soul cannot fully respond to those vibrations. He realizes only a small part of them, and so he has to learn how to respond to the rest. How is this to be done? Only by coming down to some level where the vibrations are slower, so that he can first get used to responding to them. Then, as his evolution proceeds, he learns to respond to vibrations a little faster and still a little faster, until he will eventually get back to his own level with full power to respond to all that is going on there. That is the mechanical aspect of the mind's periodical descents into matter. He takes on the lower vehicles because at his own level he does not feel fully alive. He puts himself into the lower part of the mental world and draws round him matter of that plane which is not so fine, though very fine still from our own point of view. Out of that he constructs for himself a mental body. That is practically what we call the mind. It is a vehicle the vibrations of which are his thoughts. He comes down a little lower and draws round himself astral matter, and that makes the body of his emotions. It is with that he is able to feel. Then he comes down to the physical plane and enters a physical body. He is born as a little boy and gradually takes hold of that body and tries to mold it a little as it is growing. This is a birth or incarnation, the commencement of a physical life. During that life, all kinds of experiences come to him through his physical body, and from them he should learn some lessons and develop some qualities within himself. After a time he begins to withdraw again into himself and puts off by degrees the vestures that he has assumed. The first of these to drop away is the physical body, and his withdrawal from that is what we call death. It is not the end of his activities, as many people suppose. Nothing could be further from the fact. He is simply withdrawing from one effort, bearing back with him its results. He returns, as is said in the Gospel, bearing his sheaves with him, and after a certain period of comparative repose, he will make another effort of the same kind. Each life gives certain results, and these results are assimilated and worked into faculties and powers during the time that intervenes between the death of a man and his next incarnation. Down here on the physical plane, he gets vibrations pouring in from all sides. He gets a fuller, a more vivid life of a kind, but of course it is of a lower kind. Gradually, as the soul evolves life after life, he becomes able to respond to more and higher vibrations. So there will come a time when he will return to his own home, to his own soul plane, and find himself fully responsive there, fully alive as it were. Needless to say, when he does reach that stage, he will have a far more magnificent and splendid life than anything we know about here. Before he has reached that high level, whenever he has the experience of returning to that plane, which is his true home, between these days at school, which we call lives, he finds that, with all its splendor and its glory and its beauty, for him it is unsatisfactory because he is not yet up to that level. He is not fully alive there, and he yearns again for that full response. That yearning is spoken of in the Oriental scriptures as Trishna, Sanskrita, or Tana, Pali, both words meaning thirst. The thirst for fuller life, the thirst to feel himself in full activity, and so the soul puts himself down again in order that he may experience this. It is by virtue of that experience that the use that he makes of it, that he is able to carry back with him more and more results of experience, more and more material for working up into powers. All this life of which we are so full, in which we think we are so busy and so clever, is but a preparation for a very much bigger life. Exactly as the boy's life at school is only a preparation for real life in the world, this physical life of ours is a preparation for the life on higher planes. Down here our efforts are feeble and often seem fruitless and futile. When we are able to reach the levels of the higher life, we shall have tasks to carry out, which will be really worth our while. Then we shall have a life that is worth living to an extent we cannot possibly imagine down here. A life of glorious activity and success, a life of helping others, of managing, directing, and guiding systems, worlds, nations, a far higher life than we know anything about down here. But to equip ourselves for that, we must go through this school. Thus only can the divine spark which is the soul of man fulfill its glorious destiny, and develop into a flame, into a great fire, into a very sun. A sun pouring out light and heat and strength and help on all around it, just as God himself pours his life through the whole of his universe. In a distant but nevertheless a quite certain future, we shall have the power of exercising the divinity that is within us, and of working always within it and under its direction, each in his own way. The great ones. It may be asked, how can we be certain of that? All I can say is that to myself, as well as to other students of occultism, these things are unquestionable facts. We have, during our investigation, come into touch with great numbers of people far more highly developed than ourselves. They are so much grander in every way than we, that we might well think of them almost as gods. But they themselves disclaim any such idea. They say, we are men just as you are, but we have gone further on the way than you have yet gone. Every step on that way between us and them is occupied by those who are climbing up towards them. Beyond even them we see greater spirits, mightier ones still, reaching on until all is lost for us in a cloud of glory that we cannot penetrate. But on every step of that long ladder are human beings like ourselves, only faultless, whereas we are full of faults, thoroughly developed, whereas yet we are only partially developed. In just the same way, we can look down that ladder on men standing at lower stages than ourselves. We know from studying the subject that those men, now occupying lower steps, will presently climb to where we are. But while they are climbing to this level, we will climb onwards and upwards. Those great masters of the wisdom, who seem so divine to us, tell us that they were not long ago at the stage where we are now, that we have only to keep on climbing, and we shall become as they are. But in the meantime, they will have passed on to greater heights still. What will be the ultimate end of all this age-long climbing, we do not know. We are told that we came forth from God, and that we must go back to him. And I see quite sufficient evidence to convince me that it is so. But there is certainly no end within my power of perception. And the greater people tell us also that they know nothing about an end. But we do see what happens to be an infinity of progress stretching before us, and however great it may be in the ultimate, it is achieved like all other progress, step by step, little by little. There is no question at all but that each of us can do it, because, as I have said, those glorious perfected beings, our great masters, stood no long time ago, as time goes with them, where we stand now. We have only to follow in their footsteps, and we also shall attain. The laws of evolution. All this evolution is taking place under never-changing laws. If that were not so, there would be no real progress. We can understand how it would be for a boy at school if he found all the school rules changing every day, sometimes kept and sometimes not kept. He would never know where he was. But in the school of life, we are working under natural laws which never change. The first great law is that of evolution, the steady pressure onward and upward, and the next great law is the law of divine justice, the law of cause and effect. There is in the latter no thought of reward or punishment. It does not work that way. It is simply a matter of the effects produced by causes. There is no effect anywhere without a cause, and there is no cause which does not produce some effect somewhere. Now we know that is so in science. It is so in chemistry and mechanics, because there we can generally see the result immediately. Action and reaction are equal and opposite always, and that is true in the spiritual world just as much as it is in mechanics or chemistry. We cannot see reaction in the higher worlds, because for one thing, it is not instantaneous. It may come quickly or after a long period, but the reaction always takes place and is always equal and opposite. If we send out evil to others, evil will come back to us. If we send out good, good will come back to us, and so we may be sure that the same great law of cause and effect obtains in the higher worlds as it does down here. The result of good action, yes, and good speech, and good thought too, is always happiness in some way, and further opportunity, whereas the result of evil is always eventually sorrow and limitation. If we find ourselves limited in any way in this life, then the limitation is of our own making. If we have suffering or sorrow, we alone are responsible for it, because it is the result of something that we did in the past. The manifold and complex destinies of men answer with rigid exactitude to the balance between good and evil in their previous actions. Therefore nothing whatever can come to any man unless he has deserved it, and everything that happens to him, whether it be sorrow or joy, is, on the one hand, the direct result of his own action in the past, and, on the other, an opportunity by means of which he can deliberately mold his future. This great law works both ways. It does not only react upon us from our past, but it also reaches forward from our present into our future. Every thought, word, or action produces its definite result, not a reward or punishment imposed from within, but a result inherent in the action itself, definitely connected with it in the relation of cause and effect, these being really but two inseparable parts of one whole, so that just as our present is the absolute result of what we thought and said and did in the past, so are we absolutely, definitely, and unfailingly building our future for ourselves by what we think and say and do now. Therefore, it is both our duty and our interest to study this divine law of cause and effect very closely, so that we shall be able to adapt ourselves to it and to use it as we use other great laws of nature. We are all moving steadily forward under the divine order towards a final consummation of good, but we are working our way towards it under the great laws of nature, which we may quite rightly call the laws of God. For it is God's will that we should evolve, and that we should do so by ordering our lives intelligently in accordance with His laws. The future of man. It may be of interest to see that light is thrown upon the problem of the future by the higher extensions of human consciousness, of which we have spoken elsewhere. We find that from this point of view, the future divides itself into three parts: the immediate, the remote, and the ultimate. And, oddly enough, it is of that which is furthest from us that we are able to speak with the greatest certainty, because the plan of evolution is visible to the higher sight, and its goal is clear. Nothing can interfere with the attainment of that goal, but the stages that lead up to it may be largely modified by the free will of the individuals concerned, and can therefore be foreseen only in their general outline. The end, so far as this cycle is concerned, is the accomplishment of the perfection of man. Each individual is to become something very much more than what we now mean by a great and good man, for he is to be perfect in intellect and capacity as well as spirituality. In the intellect of the greatest philosopher or man of science, and far more, all the devotion and spirituality of the greatest of saints, and far more, these are to be possessions of every unit of humanity before our cycle ends. To understand how such a stupendous result can be possible, we must grasp the plan by which evolution works. Obviously, on the ordinary theory of one poor little life of 70 years, followed by an eternity of purposeless joy or suffering, nothing of this sort could ever be achieved. But when once we realize that what we commonly call our life is only one day in the real life, and that we may have just as many of such days as are necessary for our development, we see that the command of Christ, "Be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect," Matthew 5:48, is no vain hyperbola, but a plain direction which we may reasonably expect to be able in due time to obey. The ultimate future, then, is perfection for every human being, no matter how low or undeveloped he may now be. Man will become more than man. This is what was meant in the early church by the doctrine of deification, to which many of the fathers refer. It is a matter not of pious opinion, but of utter certainty to those who see the working of the scheme. Obviously, however, we are yet very far from this attainment. A long upward path lies before us before we can reach that far distant summit, and though on the whole it rises steadily, there must necessarily be many minor ups and downs in the future, as there have been in the past. History shows us that hitherto the advancement of mankind has been cyclic in character. Each unit lives his long series of progressive lives not in one race, but in many successive races, in order that he may learn the special lessons which each has to teach. One can imagine a soul incarnating to ancient India to develop religious fervor, in classical Greece to gain artistic capacity, in the Rome of the Caesars to learn the immense power of discipline and order, among ourselves at the present day to acquire the scientific habit of mind, and so on. The same great host of souls sweeps on through all the ages, animating all these races in turn, and learning from all. But the races themselves arise, grow, decay, and fall as they are needed. So when a nation loses its former glory and falls behind in the race, as for example modern Greece seems to have done in comparison with ancient Greece, it does not mean that a certain group of men is decadent, but that there are at the moment no souls who need precisely the type of training which that race at its best used to give. Consequently, the physical bodies of the descendants of those great men of old are now animated by souls of a lower type, while the great men themselves are now as ever in the forefront of evolution, but incarnated in some other race in order to grow still greater by developing in new directions. A race dies precisely as a class at a university might die if there were no longer any students taking up that particular subject. Clairvoyance enables us to examine a much larger section of the Earth's past history than can be reached along ordinary lines, and this fuller study of the past makes it possible to some extent to forecast by analogy some of the steps in the more immediate future. From such a study of the records, it appears fairly certain that we are at the moment passing through a transition period, and that instead of representing, as we often fondly imagine, the very highest development yet seen on Earth, we are in reality in the trough between two waves of progress. The democratic tendency of which some of us are so proud does not represent, as is generally supposed, the ultimate achievement of human wisdom, but is an experiment which was tried very thoroughly and carried out to its logical conclusion thousands of years ago, and then abandoned as irrational, unworkable, and leading to endless confusion. If we are to repeat the course of that last experiment, it seems unpleasantly certain that we shall have to pass through a good deal of this confusion and suffering once again. But when that is over, and reason begins to reassert itself, there will be before us a period of far more rapid progress, in which we shall be able to avail ourselves of many aids which are not now at our disposal. The mere fact that the use of the higher faculties is slowly spreading among humanity will presently make an almost incalculable difference in many directions. Imagine a state of affairs in which all deception or fraud will be impossible, in which misunderstandings can no longer occur, because each man can read the thoughts of the other, in which no one will ever again be set to do work for which he is unfitted, because from the first, parents and tutors will be able to see exactly the capabilities of those committed to their care, in which a doctor cannot make mistakes because he will see for himself exactly what is the matter with his patient, and can watch in detail the action of his remedies. Think what a difference it will make in our lives when death no longer separates us from those whom we love, because the astral world lies open to us just as does the physical, when it will be impossible for men any longer to doubt the reality of the divine scheme, because its lower stages are visible before their eyes. Art and music will be far grander then, for astral colors and harmonies will be at our command, as well as those which we now know. Every feature of life will be wider and fuller, because we shall see so much more than we do now of the wonderful and beautiful world in which our lot is cast. Understanding more, we cannot but admire and love more, and so we shall be infinitely happier, and we draw steadily nearer to that ultimate perfection, which is absolute happiness, because it is union with the eternal love. 6. Reincarnation. The doctrine of reincarnation, or rebirth, was widely known in ancient civilizations, and is even today held by the majority of the human race. For instance, it is held by the Hindus, the Buddhists, and by a certain section of the followers of Islam, some of the Sufis who study the esoteric side of their religion. It appears in some private books of the Jewish religion, and there are certain definite statements of the Christ which seem to prove that this belief was both held and taught by him. Modern as well as ancient philosophers recognize this hypothesis as one deserving the most serious consideration. Lessing taught it. It is advocated in Schopenhauer's works, and Hume in his essay on immortality wrote, "What is incorruptible must be ungenerable. The soul, therefore, if it is immortal, existed before our birth." Metempsychosis, therefore, is the only system of this kind to which philosophy can hearken. That is to say, the common idea that the soul began with our birth and is eternal is philosophically impossible. If it began with our birth, it will end with our death. If it had a beginning, it will have an ending. If it comes forth from eternity, then it must at last go back to eternity. But we cannot philosophically hold the idea that a thing begins in time and does not end in time. Again, Huxley writes in his Evolution and Ethics, like the doctrine of evolution itself, that of transmigration has its roots in the world of reality, and it may claim such support as the great argument from analogy is capable of supplying. Max Muller, the great Orientalist, began by writing of this theory as a superstition, but at the end of his life, in a work which was published after his death, he admitted that he himself believed in it. So it is clear that many of the greatest minds have held this idea, and for that reason alone it is not to be dismissed as a mere superstition. Some misconceptions. Like other teachings, the doctrine of reincarnation has been very much corrupted and misunderstood. There has been a great deal of misconception due to the idea of metempsychosis, which was held in later days in Greece and Rome, and also in India. Those who held this idea taught that it was possible for a very wicked man to be reborn in an animal body as a punishment for his sins. There is no foundation for that idea, and it has never been taught in the mysteries or in the inner teaching of any religion. It is perhaps not unnatural that it should have arisen. There are various indications that might be taken to suggest it. For instance, we very often see a person whose face recalls some kind of animal. It is not unnatural that uninstructed people should have imagined that such a one had been born in an animal body previously and had brought over some trace of it into his life. Then also some of the lower types of man distinctly show animal characteristics, cunning such as is attributed to the fox, ferocity such as is credited to the wolf, in fact many qualities that are supposed to be typical of animals. It is not surprising that people should have thought that if a man showed such distinctly animal characteristics during his present life, he might find himself hereafter in a body more suitable for their expression, but there is no truth in that idea. It is true that each man in one life reaps the result not only of his last life, but of all his previous ones. They mold him in certain ways, and he receives a physical body capable of expressing the type of man that he is. It is therefore possible for a man, by a very foolish or sensual or perhaps a very wicked life, to fall back somewhat, though not very much. Even at the worst, a man who is capable of a very coarse animal life is not in any case a highly evolved person, and therefore he does not throw himself very far back by living such a life. He does thereby reduce his chances of progress, but since the current of evolution always tends to help and not to hinder us, it is difficult for a man to behave so badly as to throw himself back to a much lower level of human life. So far as we have seen in the investigations we have made, and altogether we have examined many thousands of cases, it is absolutely impossible for any human being to throw himself back into a lower kingdom from which he came up thousands of years ago. But it might be objected, a man who has just emerged from the animal kingdom might possibly throw himself back again. Not so, because the man who has just come out could not have the strength of will to be wicked enough to produce any such results, and the animal and human kingdoms are very definitely divided. Certainly there is a great deal of overlapping, but when an individual reaches the human kingdom, he receives a divine spark, and cannot again relinquish it. A man belonging to a highly evolved race, who lives an exceptionally evil life, might be reborn in some less evolved race. He might possibly throw himself back far enough to deserve birth in some primitive tribe, though such a man has already so many more interests, so much more capacity than the primitive man, that it is doubtful if he could throw himself back into such an incarnation as that. But he certainly might, in exceptional circumstances, be reborn into surroundings where he would have not so good an opportunity of progress as he has now. The old theory of falling back into animal life is an impossibility. We cannot do that because life is a continual progress, and when once a man comes into existence as a human soul, inhabiting a causal body, he can never again fall back into a lower kingdom of nature, whatever mistakes he may make, or however he may fail to take advantage of his opportunities. If he is idle in the school of life, he may need to take the same lesson over and over again before he has really learnt it, but still on the whole, progress is steady, even though it may often be slow. Reincarnation solves many problems. There are many problems in life which can be solved if we accept the idea of reincarnation, while they remain hopeless puzzles in any other theory. First of all, there is the awful problem of the different destinies of men. We talk about men being born free and equal. Are they? If we really think of it, we shall see very soon that they are not. We must try to realize that the world is a school, and that the savage is a young soul in a lower class of this world school, whereas the civilized man is an older soul in a much higher class, and each is getting what he can appreciate and assimilate. One has passed through the lower stage long ago, and it is not unfair that he should have the higher chance now because he has earned it by working through the lower classes. It is not unfair that the savage should be in the lower class. It is no more unfair than that one child should be 6 and another 12 or 16. One is younger than the other, but he will one day grow up to be something comparable to what the other is now. We would not say a school is unjustly ruled because the small children are in one class and the bigger children are in another. That is exactly how it must be and how it ought to be. Again, if we are able to believe that there is only one life and that all eternity depends on that one life, it is utterly useless to talk about divine justice or to suppose that there is a beneficent deity. That is the truth about it, if we face the facts. But people do not think of these things. The belief in reincarnation alone makes it possible for us to see things as they are, and yet to hold the theory of absolute divine justice. Then take the question of the innate qualities of men. There is no doubt that some people are born cleverer than others. Those who have had anything to do with education know that in a school there are clever boys and stupid boys. It is not a question there of the age of the body. Some learn eagerly and quickly, others find it practically impossible to get along at all. And then, on the other hand, and perhaps as a sort of corollary to that, you also find that some are very quick along one line and exceedingly stupid along another. Why? A man has practiced one of these things, and so he does it perfectly. The other thing he is attempting for the first time, and so he does it clumsily. It is quite natural when we grant that there are many lives. Take the case of a genius. Mozart, as a little boy of 4 years old, could play beautifully and compose really splendid and difficult music. Haydn was also a composer at the age of 10. Now, the business of making harmonies is to a certain extent a complicated matter. The ordinary man has to study for some years in order to do it perfectly. But Mozart, as a little child 4 years of age, composes offhand harmonies to which no one can take exception. How could that little child do that? Why should not every child be equally capable? The common explanation is that he came of a musical family, but some hundreds of people must have come from the same line of descent, and yet we do not get hundreds of famous musicians. The reason is perfectly clear. The man who is a genius along one line has worked along that line before, He knows how to compose music just precisely for the same reason that you and I know certain things. I know something about occultism and theology. Why? Because I have spent a great many years in the study of these things. It may be that you have meanwhile been immersed in business. It is not unfair that I know more about occultism and theology than you do. If it came to the question of business, you would probably know more than I do. But that is not unfair because you have spent your life in business and you have acquired that faculty, whereas I have been acquiring others. In each case, we have the straightforward result of what we have done. A man is born with certain qualities and faculties because in other lives he has done certain things, and so he brings over a general familiarity with them, an interest in them, and a talent for them. That accounts for precocious children. Then there is the way in which we at once recognize certain things. I can remember quite well when the mystic teaching, which is often called theosophy, first came to me. It was absolutely new to me, and yet as I read, I recognized point after point as the truth. I could not then have explained by argument how I knew it to be true, but I did know it. Many others probably have had similar experiences. Why? Because they too have studied these things in other lives, and the soul within them knows it. Again, we meet a person and suddenly are strongly drawn to him. We know at once that we are going to like him and get on with him. Why? Because we have met that person before, and he is a friend of old. And we have met other persons from whom we have instinctively recoiled. Why? Because we have met them before, and perhaps they did us some injury, or we ourselves did them some harm, and that is why we feel instinctively that we should not get on with them. There is another point which this theory explains. Why do great races die out in the world? Why did the glory that was Greece die out as well as the grandeur that was Rome? Why are some races apparently on the downward arc, their birth rate decreasing, and fewer people appearing among them? There is a good reason for it. As I have said before, each race represents a class in which certain lessons are taught. Some of the souls going to the school in this world have already learnt all the lessons that a particular race has to teach. Therefore, they will not go back into it, and when all the egos who need these lessons have passed through it, it is no longer required. Each soul goes where he can best acquire the teaching he especially needs. That is the scheme of evolution. Therefore, when its special lesson to the world has been given by a race, it begins to die out. But so long as there still remain souls who require that particular lesson, that race will persist. Various objections are made to the theory of reincarnation. People often say, I could not possibly think of having another life. I have had such a lot of misery and suffering. I could not possibly endure another. It cannot be true. But the universe is not arranged to suit our personal wishes, but to give us whatever is good for us in the way of evolution. So the mere fact that man thinks he could not possibly endure another life is no proof that he may not eventually have to take another. True, his strong desire in the matter would be a factor in holding him back from another incarnation for some time, but it would only be holding him back from the opportunity of learning the lessons he needs. The mere fact that he does not want to live again does not affect the case at all. Why we do not remember our previous lives. People often say, why do we not remember those other lives? Why do we not remember now, in this life, every day we spent in learning to read? We do not remember every stroke we have made in learning to write, but we can write. We have acquired the faculty, but we have forgotten the details through which we learnt it. Now, exactly the same thing is true with regard to reincarnation. That with which we remember is our mind. It is not the same mind that learnt those lessons in the past, because at every birth the soul puts itself down afresh and draws round it new astral matter, new mental matter, and a new physical body. Therefore, just as the body a man has now cannot recall the feelings of another body he had many hundreds of years ago, so his present mind cannot remember the detailed experiences of a life long ago when it did not exist. But the soul behind, the real man, remembers at his own level. He cannot make this physical brain of his remember down here, but he knows well enough at his own level what he can do. He can throw down into these lower vehicles the powers which he acquired in that previous life, because these powers are drawn up into him. and when he puts himself down again, he puts down the powers which he acquired as the result of all these lives, but he does not remember the details. At the same time, there are a great many people who do remember. I am not referring to those who have been taught how to do it, as I was long ago in India, but I am thinking of people who do it naturally. Now and then we find children who do remember, chiefly when they have died in early childhood and have been reborn almost immediately. They will say, "I had another mother once." They will describe this former mother, and perhaps even remember her name. In Eastern countries like Burma, it is not uncommon for children to remember their immediate past. I have investigated several cases of this sort, where a child asserted that he had been born previously in such and such a village, perhaps 50 miles away. I have had the child taken to that village to see whether going to the spot would stimulate his memory, and it was done so very often. He has been able to point out the people whom he used to know, and to call to memory things which proved he had lived there before. One should attach but little importance to claims by people to have been somebody of great power and influence in the past. For one reason, because the person who was in a position of power in any incarnation must have made a very widespread karma which acted on many hundreds of people, and they must have reacted on him. And therefore such a person could never have an ordinary obscure life, such as most of us have, because it would be useless for him. He or she would not be able to work out the karma which he had already made under such conditions. It is almost certain that he would be in some prominent position again, because only in that prominent position could such a tremendously mixed karma work itself out. We find that people of great distinction in the past were usually people of prominence in other lives. Intervals between lives. There are two great groups of people among those who are likely to incarnate in the more advanced races, one of them taking an interval of about 1,000 to 1,200 years between births, and the other about 700 years. But those are averages, and a great many take very much shorter periods than that. It depends upon a very large number of different factors. Our examination of the subject has shown us that, and there may well be other factors we have not yet discovered. But it is quite certain that there can be very large variations. Those who are less developed come back very much sooner, because it is the wearing out first of the astral vehicle, and secondly of the mental vehicle, that takes up the interval between lives. The people who have very little mentality come back very quickly, because there is little or no time spent in using up their mental process. That is why, although their number is actually not as large as it appears to be, there seems to be such an enormous preponderance of undeveloped people in the world. There are in fact many more highly developed egos than one would suppose, but they come back at longer intervals. For myself, I believe in reincarnation, or rather, I know it is true, because I have been taught to look back into previous lives of my own. I have proved to myself that I was not hallucinating, or dreaming, or imagining things by having been able to verify certain facts. I have been able, for example, to complete certain inscriptions, parts of which were missing, and I have been able in a number of instances to supply certain details with regard to early times, which could only have been explained by personal memory of the case. 7. The Just Law. It is a fundamental article in our liberal Catholic teaching that perfect justice rules the world. We have heard a great deal about God's holy law that changes not, the law of karma, of cause and effect, of action and reaction, or of readjustment, and those who have succeeded to some extent in opening the faculties of the soul, and have thereby obtained the power to see upon other planes than the physical, have seen enough to convince them of its existence and of the perfection of its working. Those who do not yet see on higher planes will realize, if they will follow the argument out logically and carefully, that this law is a necessity. It is a great truth that God is not mocked, and that as a man soweth, so shall he also reap. Galatians 6:7. Even without the inner sight, one may arrive at a reasonable certainty with regard to the fact of this law. But as to the method of its working, little is known, and it is not easy for us to form even a rudimentary conception upon the subject. We know that its administration is in the hands of the four great beings, who in India are called the four Devarajas, or angel kings. Sometimes they are spoken of as the four regions of the earth, or of the elements, or sometimes of the four quarters of the globe. Sir Edwin Arnold speaks of them in that way in The Light of Asia, a poetical oriental description, you may say, yet it has a definite foundation in fact. The form in which it is cast is obviously traditional, a sort of fairy tale, but there is a fact behind it. Both the prophet Ezekiel and the evangelist St. John speak of these Leadbeater as living wheels of the fire full of eyes within, or as the four creatures round the throne of God, Ezekiel 1:18, Revelation 4:6 and 8. They are the holy ones for whom and for their armies Fohat builds the four-winged wheels. Madame Blavatsky writes of them in The Secret Doctrine. These are the four Maharajas, or great kings of the Dhyan Chohans, the Devas, who preside each over one of the four cardinal points. They are the regents or angels who rule over the cosmical forces of north, south, east, and west, forces having each a distinct occult property. These beings are also connected with karma, as the latter needs physical and material agents to carry out its degree, such as the four kinds of winds, for instance, professedly admitted by science to have their respective evil and beneficent influences upon the health of mankind and every living thing. Vossius writes to the same effect. Though St. Augustine has said that every visible thing in this world has an angelic virtue as an overseer near it, it is not individuals but entire species of things that must be understood, each such species having indeed its particular angel to watch it. All these descriptions are incomprehensible to many, and yet no one who has seen these strange and wondrous potencies can doubt for a moment, reading these accounts, that those men of old had seen them too. But even this vivid description gives us no hint of the manner of these actions, of the way in which they do their wonderful work. They are full of eyes within, typifying unceasing watchfulness on all planes and in all dimensions, yet they never see the millions of human beings for whom they legislate with such amazing accuracy. Never see them, I mean, as beings, as individuals, as entities of any kind. How then do they see them, and how do they carry out their work? A stupendous mathematical problem. Perhaps the nearest that we can come to the truth is to say that the Leadbeater, the whole of our evolution, is a stupendous mathematical problem, a vast equation to be solved, a sum so immense that all heaven and earth are but the slate upon which it is written, and that in that vast sum each man is a little subsidiary calculation, a tiny yet quite necessary part of that inconceivable whole, a single item in a colossal celestial account, infinitesimal in itself and yet indispensable to the balance and symmetry of that tremendous total, and therefore to be treated with the uttermost care and respect, and worked out with meticulous accuracy. That is no doubt a somewhat mechanical view, but we must observe that this law of karma is one of the great laws of nature, that it does thus act mechanically, and that there is a close and real analogy between it and the mathematical idea. When the one becomes many, when the Logos puts himself down into matter, he may be said to state that prodigious problem. Indeed, he makes an almost infinite number of separate statements, which he throws forth in ever greater and greater quantity as the universe passes onward. And all these influence one another, borrow factors one from another, act and react upon one another, creating ever-increasing complexities until all possible combinations and permutations have been made, until the fullest expression has been attained. This is the Pravriti Marga, the path of outgoing. When this has been trodden, when its results have been fully achieved, then commences the Nivritti Marga, the path of return, the process of simplification and solution. Each minor equation balances itself, cancels itself out. One by one these are withdrawn as men attain adeptship, until finally all is withdrawn. The great effort is over, the hidden work is done, and nothing is left upon the lower planes. Each one who achieves adeptship reduces the complexity and lessens the pressure for all the others until finally all is balanced. The operation has succeeded, the harvest is garnered, the victory is won. The purpose of the Logos is accomplished in the consummation of the ages. That statement of karma may be new to some, but I think it will be found an illuminative statement, and if we follow it out carefully and fully, it will be seen that the analogy is a close and real one. I do not know the higher mathematics sufficiently well to trace it fully, but I am sure that along that line there is illumination to be attained. As Pythagoras said long ago, God geometrizes, and he will surely get some hint who thinks of man the variable, always drawing nearer and nearer to the limit, but never fully touching it. If he thinks of the different variables and of the constantly changing relation between them, which in mathematics is called the differential, which has to be calculated at every moment by these great lords of karma. Meantime, we are in the midst of all this intricate calculation, and far as yet from that great fulfillment. Each man is still striving to find expression for himself, that full expression of what the Logos means him to be, which is needed for the realization of the divine plan. And because as yet we are so far from the goal, man finds his expression often in unbalanced forms, in incomplete statements, leaving many reactions for the present unsatisfied, putting aside one part of the sum until another has been worked out. The whole problem with all its manifold ramifications is before the Leadbeater, that is their work, and they are fully competent to deal with it. But they can give it to us only bit by bit as we come to it, and as we are capable of handling it. As each man ends his life in the heaven world, they glance over the state of his account and its relation to scores, perhaps hundreds of other accounts around it, and they at once decide for him two things: the kind of physical body which he has earned for his next birth, and the amount of karma that he can work out during the forthcoming incarnation. This latter is his prarabdha karma, the destiny which he has to work out during that life. The design of the future body is thrown out in the shape of a thought form into which, as into a mold, the matter of his etheric body will be poured. The prescribed karma presents itself as a mathematical problem to be solved by the legion of agents of the Leadbeater on the various planes, who have to find suitable methods for its application. In each birth some advancement is made towards the working out of the greater problem, and some of its factors are resolved, but necessarily in this process fresh karma is generated, and certain new factors are introduced which have to be resolved or adjusted in turn. Often some sort of surd or apparently irreducible quantity will be left over, and will have to be handed on from life to life until some factor turns up which will balance or absorb it. Sometimes quite a large amount of entirely fresh but reducible karma has to be introduced in order to get rid of that surd, thus creating fresh complications in order to solve others, but always bringing the whole nearer to the final solution. Thus it is that these great lords of karma envisage the magnificent task which is entrusted to them. Complexity which no human mind could grasp is simplicity to them. All is absolutely impersonal, for they see men only as equations, and the law which they administer works with flawless accuracy. Remember how it is said in the Light of Asia, "It knows not wrath nor pardon, utter true. Its measures meet, its faultless balance weighs. Times are as naught, tomorrow it will judge, or after many days." Their ingenuity is taxed, if we can reverently put it in that way, to find the readiest solution for each man's problem, giving due consideration to all the myriad influences involved, and ever taking heed that the weight of long-past evil shall not press too hardly in any one incarnation, and so defeat the ultimate object of human evolution. When the end is reached, perfect justice has been done to all, even in the most minute particular. But that very fact implies that to our consciousness, limited as it is by our illusion of space and time, there must be intermediate points at which justice is not yet complete, at which we still have many debts to pay to others and many compensations to receive from them. Observing this, as sometimes we must, let us not allow ourselves to be misled by the appearance of the moment into doubting the perfect working of the divine law. Be sure that it is there. Though the mills of God grind slowly, yet they grind exceedingly small. But it is only at the end that the perfect consummation shall be seen. Yet all the way through, at every point, unsleeping vigilance is being exercised. Every man has his little quota to contribute to this great sum. Every man is a necessary part of that august and sacred plan. Therefore it is that we lean upon his justice as upon a pillar of his throne. Therefore we know that all is well, even when roads are rough and skies seem dark. For behind all clouds shines always the Sun of Righteousness, and above our heads gleams ever the Star of the King. God's justice, surest proof of his love. God's eternal justice, working through his mighty law of cause and effect, is one of the surest proofs of his love, because without that law of eternal justice, we should never know what should be the result of any of our thoughts and words and actions. We should live in a chaos of ignorance and misery. It is the inevitability of that great law of cause and effect, that whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap, which enables us to plan our own future with absolute certainty, and so to obey his command that we shall presently become perfect, even as our Father in heaven is perfect. Matthew 5:48. That is a high ideal for any man to set before himself, but the Christ himself has said it, and he never told his people to do that which was impossible for them. It would indeed be impossible if we had only this single life and had to achieve this ideal in a limited and circumscribed time. But when we realize that we have all time before us, and that all things work together for good to them that love God, when we learn that we may come back into earth life again and again, so that the temptation which has been too much for us in one life may be vanquished in another, we understand how it is possible for man at last to become perfect. We see how every man will finally attain what God means him to attain, no matter how far away he may seem to be straying from that path. Those who are called the wicked are young souls who do things they should not do because they are young and ignorant. They make mistakes because they know no better. When these souls grow up, they will know more, so that those who are now wicked or careless men will be the good men of the future. No man is forced, no man is driven, except in so far as the eternal law of cause and effect brings inconvenience and suffering as the result of deviation from the path. And so at last, by slow degrees, the soul learns that he must control his bodies and prevent them from controlling him, from doing such things as will bring him into difficulties in the future. To that extent he is driven by the action of the universal law, but otherwise God interferes with no man. Our choice is free. We have more and more free will given to us as we grow better and stronger. As we ascend higher and higher on the ladder of evolution, more and more power is given to us. Only a little power is given at first, lest, if we misuse it, we should wreck ourselves altogether. It is like a little child learning to walk. The mother must let it try. She knows it will fall, but she takes care that it may fall softly. In the same way, the young soul will inevitably make mistakes, but the amount of free will given is not enough to allow him to wreck himself, but just enough for him to learn by experience what he should do and what he should not do. Karma and divine grace. Karma is the effect of what we have done. It is not a cold, lifeless destiny or fate. It is the effect, the very pliable and adaptable effect, of what we have done in this or in past lives. How can it be reconciled with divine grace? It depends on what we mean by divine grace. If we are thinking of it as some scheme by which we can escape results of what we have done, then certainly the two cannot be reconciled. If we have set certain forces in motion, then the result will come to us. Not only that we cannot escape it, but if we know anything at all about the divine law, we would not even wish to escape it. Cause and effect are simply two sides of the same thing. Divine grace is divine power and divine help poured down upon us. It flows out over the world like sunlight. We can take advantage of the sunlight, or we can shut ourselves away and not take advantage of it. In the same way, divine grace is the power with which God floods his world. If we do not take advantage of it, that is not his fault. It is the same with that great outpouring of grace, the sacrament of the altar. No one is compelled to come and partake of it, but there it is ready for those who will take it. Those two, karma and divine grace, do not contradict each other. Whatever we have done, the result comes to us, but we can modify the action of karma by setting up fresh causes, by applying a new force which counteracts the old. Karma is very adaptable, and it will work itself out in one way or another. All things are arranged for our helping and not for our hindrance. So if we cry out when things go wrong with us, that God has forgotten us, or that He is not a God of love, we are only betraying our ignorance and showing that we do not understand the experiences through which we are passing. Under this most marvelous law of cause and effect, nothing can fall upon us unless we have deserved it in the past, and because we have deserved it, and we owe that much of debt, the sooner we can clear it off, the better for us in every way. It is in love that this evil comes to us, and we must receive it understandingly and not rebelliously and ignorantly, knowing that it comes because it has to come, and the sooner we get rid of it, the sooner we shall be free for further evolution. Sometimes, looking at things from the physical point of view only, we find it hard to see how the love is working. He who is clairvoyant and can see what happens on higher planes can also see much more of the working of this great law. We cannot pretend to explain anything as yet by any clairvoyant sight to which we have attained, but we can at least tell our people with absolute certainty that the utter love of God has been proved over and over again, beyond all possibility of mistake or error, and that when we see what we think to be failures in the working of that mighty law, it is because we see only in part, and therefore cannot understand what is being done. All that happens is being guided and used for our benefit, and the best that under all the circumstances is possible is being done for all. When we can see from the higher level, we are utterly certain of that. For the moment, most of us have to take it to some extent on faith, though I believe that even on the physical plane there is abundant proof of the love of God and of the evolution which is His plan for men. It is only because we are short-sighted, because we are only just beginning to climb the path of return to Him, from whom we came, that we seem to see so much evil and cannot understand the ever-underlying good, though there is indeed overwhelming proof of it. We must never forget, if we wish to understand, that God's arrangements are always for the evolution of the man himself, the soul, so we must look at what happens always from the point of view of the soul, not of the body. This certainty of the utter love of God permeates the whole of our liberal Catholic theology. It is all based on that great fact, and he who wishes to comprehend the truth of things as we see it must always have that idea in mind, and never allow himself to be turned aside from it, or lose sight of it for a moment. That is the fundamental rock upon which the structure of true religion is built, that God is love and light, and that in Him there is no darkness at all. And if we wish to serve God as He wishes to be served, we must show that love and that light in ourselves as far as we can. We must imitate Him, and in us also there must be no doubt of the love or the light, no failure in love towards our brethren, because by showing love to others, we may truly follow our Master the Christ, who is the Lord of love. 8. Salvation. We are now in a position to understand something of the real truths which lie behind the idea of salvation. The idea of salvation from an imagined hell is entirely out of touch with the facts, because that from which men are supposed to be saved simply does not exist. None of the texts which are supposed to justify this idea can in reality bear the meaning popularly attached to them. Eternal hell is a figment of the imagination, and has nothing whatever at the back of it which is worthy of the attention of a thinking man. There are various uses of the word saved, and we find at least one or two texts in which its use not only does not fit in with the popular idea, but even indicates something of the real truth. Let us, to begin with, examine some exceedingly significant texts. In Luke 23:13, someone asks the Christ, "Lord, are there few that be saved?" In his answer he makes a very remarkable statement. He says, "Strive to enter in at the strait gate, for many will seek to enter in, and shall not be able." In Matthew 7:13 and 14, we find the same statement in another form. "Enter ye in at the strait gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat. Because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. There are actually some exponents of Scripture who apply these texts to the gates of heaven after death, but the meaning of these texts, when properly understood, is something entirely different and something quite reasonable, as we shall see further on. As has been pointed out before, we must take words written at a certain time in the world's history in the sense in which people, in that country and at that time, used them and understood them. If a writer uses a word, we may be sure he uses it as other authors of his period use it, and therefore it is useful to examine other literature written at the same time and see how these words were used then. The word saved, from Latin salvus, safe, has a technical meaning which was just as well known to students then as it is now to those who have studied the literature of that period. In order that I may make its exact meaning clear, I must ask the reader to bear in mind the conception of evolution outlined in the preceding chapters. We have seen that man is the resultant of a great evolutionary scheme. The true man within is royal and divine, and the object of evolution is to let that divine man manifest through his lower vehicles, which are constantly evolving and learning to express more and more of his divine nature, until at last the man becomes a perfect channel for the life and power of the Logos. This is the glorious goal which every man must someday reach. But we must not think of this development as happening simultaneously for everyone. Not all men now on earth are at the same level of development. We know that as a matter of everyday experience. How is that to be accounted for? If we were to suppose that all mankind started even and equal at some remote period in the past, some must have gone ahead more rapidly, and others have fallen back in the most amazing manner. That is not at all the explanation. What we find to be the fact in investigating it is that constantly waves of divine life come pouring down in succession into this universe. That fact is exactly in harmony with all that we see round us in this world. Take as an example any human family. Its members are not all the same age. They did not all start in life at the same moment. They represent a number of successive generations, and therefore some are children still, some are young people, some are middle-aged, some growing old. It is a fact in nature which we have to recognize, and just as several generations follow one another, so do successive waves of evolution follow one another. A better illustration still is to think of classes in a school. In any school there are a number of classes. It is not the fault of one particular boy that he is 10 years old, while another boy is 15. It is not the fault of the more primitive races that they are not highly developed. It is simply that they are generally younger souls, and they have not yet had the teaching and experience which some of us have had in the past. Of course, it is perfectly possible for those in the same class to advance, or to slip back, to take advantage or not of the teaching which is given to them. That makes a comparatively small variation, whereas the big variation of age decides the class in which the people begin their lives, and it is only rarely that one here and there gets very far ahead of his contemporaries. We, all of us, represent a certain stage in development. We are, let us say, a class in God's mighty school. We are supposed to be learning certain lessons. Some of us are learning those lessons quickly, and some are slow learners. Souls differ, just as boys in a school differ. Some boys are clever, and some are stupid. Some take the trouble to learn the rules of the school and conform to them. Others are ignorant and careless. Just like that are the souls that come down into incarnation. Some of them at once try to learn the rules of life and live according to them. They are like the good boys of the school. They get on quickly, and their way is comparatively easy. Those who are dull and ignorant, who do not understand the rules, or even if they do, will not take the trouble to follow them, are the less developed people, and they have a great deal of trouble with their progress. They do not learn rapidly. They have to keep on coming back time after time to learn the same lesson all over again. The people who are earnestly trying to improve certainly do improve, even though they may not be able to see much fruit of their effort in a few years' time. As they pass from life to life, they do very certainly show great advancement. But those other people, who are not really trying to evolve, only make very gradual progress. Some advance they must make, because everything round us is very slowly moving onward and upward, and they are swept along with the current, but it will be so slow as to be scarcely perceptible. The Day of Judgment. Each successive age or aeon has its special form of life, its own special virtues to develop, its own evil qualities to overcome, and so on, and represents a class in the divine school. There have been other ages before our own. They were higher classes, or classes at any rate, where the people had been longer in the school. There are others coming on behind us, younger souls than we. They will belong to their own separate class. We are expected by the end of our particular aeon to reach a certain level. Long before that, a great examination, a great testing will take place, and a decision will be made as to which of the people will be able to reach the required level in the time allotted. It is that examination which is symbolized in our scriptures by the Day of Judgment. The Christ is simply examining his people on that occasion. He is not condemning them for evil done, or rewarding them in a material way for the good they may have done, but he is testing them to see whether they are fit for certain progress, or whether they are not. Those who are fit for that progress, he moves on. Those who would be lagging behind and be a hindrance to the more advanced would, by dropping back, themselves become the more advanced members of the next wave of souls, so that would be an excellent arrangement for all concerned. That is a rough analogy of what the Logos of the system does with us. His day of judgment is still a long way off, but it will certainly come. At that critical period, a considerable portion of humanity will have to drop out from our scheme of evolution, simply because they have not yet developed themselves enough to be able to take advantage of the opportunities which will then be opening before mankind. This is the separation of the sheep from the goats. The sheep will pass on into Aeonian, age-long life, the goats into temporary Aeonian death, or, more correctly, into a condition of comparatively suspended evolution, but not for a moment to be looked upon as eternal. Thus, who for us fall out of the current of progress for a period of time will take up the work again in the next scheme of evolution. He who is salvus, or saved, is the man who is even now already quite sure to pass that examination, and is certain to go on with the present wave of evolution. The man who is not saved is the one who may not be ready when the time comes to go on, and will have to drop back and learn some of his lessons all over again. This is merely a decision against him as far as that aeon or age is concerned. What the occult student understands by salvation is thus being safe from this adverse decision and absolutely certain to go on with the particular life wave into which God has put us from the beginning. Those who are able to do that, to use the Buddhist term, enter the stream, which means that they take what is called the first great initiation. The man who enters the stream is swept on by that stream and will quickly reach the further shore. That is to say, he will reach adeptship in a few lives. All will eventually be saved. None can fail eventually. Failure is absolutely impossible because all the time required is given to us. We cannot remove ourselves from the stream of evolution. We can delay on the way, and to delay means further lives on earth. To get away from these repeated incarnations is to escape, as it is put in the Buddhist religion, from the wheel of birth and death. This is what the Christ meant when he spoke of the broad way that leads to destruction, and how many there be that follow it, and of the narrow and difficult path that leads to life, and how comparatively few there are who follow it. Matthew 7:13. He said again and again that the broad way leads to death. So it does. It leads to death and birth. It leads in fact to a continuation of what we have been doing for many thousands of years, being born over and over again, and taking just a little progress each time. The other way, the narrow, steep, upward path, leads to escape from rebirth and to an endless life outside these physical conditions. It is just that. The broad road is a slow way. The steep, rocky, rugged upward path is a swift way. The goal in the end is the same. But when the Christ said that there are few who take the swift but steep and rugged path, he did not mean in the least that there were few who enter into the heaven world after death. That is a misrepresentation of the facts. Moreover, it absolutely contradicts a number of other texts in which the heaven world is clearly indicated. For instance, when the Apostle John is attempting to describe the heaven world, he speaks of a great multitude which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, clothed with white robes and with palms in their hands. Revelation 7:9. When Christ speaks of the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of heaven, he is really using a technical term belonging to the mysteries. He thereby means the great white brotherhood, the great initiates, the great saints, as they are generally called in the church. They are the safe or saved ones, and the man who joins their ranks rises to a higher level altogether. He becomes a superman, and to attain that, certainly strait is the gate and narrow is the way, and few there be that find it. Few choose that difficult path. The majority of mankind will certainly travel along the broad and easy road, and will take innumerable lives to reach the goal. But eventually, as Sir Edwin Arnold has put it, all will reach the sunlit snows. Though all will be gradually shepherded along the path of progress, whether they understand it or not, it is obvious that the slower we go, the more we delay ourselves on the way, the more trouble we shall have, and the more difficulties we shall find. If we apply our intelligence to try to understand God's plan, and our will to work with it, we shall save ourselves a vast amount, not only of time and trouble, but of the suffering which is inseparable from all these physical lives. But to say that those who take the broad road will not be saved is to make a mockery of the Savior of the world. It is to say that he does not save the enormous majority of human beings. Of course he does, but only in his own time and in his own way. It is perfectly true to say that Christ is the Savior of the world. It is the Christ in every man that is our hope of glory, and without that Christ within, indeed our chances of evolution would be very poor. It would be practically impossible for us to rise to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ.